Welcome to the Therapeutic Food Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Mary Mitchell. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, therapeutic diet expert, and founder of The Road to Living Whole. There are many different diets out there. It's hard to know which one is right for you with your chronic illness and autoimmune disease. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you the foundational pieces every single therapeutic diet out there shares, and also how to use the best one for your particular diagnosis. If you've been looking for a meal planning partner, help navigating the complicated healthcare system, and want to feel better quickly, I'm your girl. Grab your kombucha and notebook. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited for today's guests. We have two of them. We have Trevor Connor, who is CEO of the Paleo Diet, and Dr. Griffin McMath, who is the Chief Strategy Officer, but I guess she is the face of the community and the biggest health advocacy. And so I'm just really excited. The Paleo Diet changed my health and completely just revolutionized my health, really, when I discovered it 13 years ago. And it, to me, in my experience, has been the foundation of health and the diet. And I find that a lot of people misunderstand it. And so I'm really excited to talk to Trevor and Griffin about the Paleo Diet. And I believe that they are going to kind of demystify things and also clarify like the role that what the Paleo Diet is and how it interacts with chronic illness. And just all of the things that I'm just really excited for you guys to learn. So will you guys please introduce yourselves and then share your story? How did you come to be the CEO and the leaders of the Paleo Diet?
Absolutely. So should I go first?
Go right ahead.
That was quite the introduction. Thank you. And excited to talk with you. I'm really glad the Paleo Diet had that impact on you. So I am the CEO, and the short version of my history is so Dr. Cordain, who invented the Paleo Diet, he was a professor at CSU, where I went to school. So I arrived there as a graduate student, and I heard all the other grad students talking about this guy they were referring to as the serial killer because he was killing Cheerios at the time. I had no idea what they were talking about. Asked me, have you heard of the Paleo Diet? And said, nope, never heard of it. I think I was the only one there. I had to take his class. And I will admit to, I spent the entire class going, this guy's full of it. I was actually angry about the class. Did not buy a word of it because I came from an athletic background. I had been studying sports nutrition for years, and my understanding was you couldn't get enough simple sugar in your body. And spent the summer after that course trying to prove him wrong. In the course of trying to prove him wrong and going through the science, I just kept going, well, damn, that makes sense. But he's got to be wrong on this. And then I go research that and go, well, that actually kind of makes sense too. I had been a professional cyclist, and as I went through this research, I just started changing my diet. I wasn't even aware of it. And I was 38 at the time, and at 40, because of the changes in my diet, I was able to go back and race professionally again.
That's crazy.
So that sold me. And then I went to him and said, okay, would you be my advisor?
Cool. What about you, Griffin?
So I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I've had just a really fun and constructive career thus far. I've worked in clinical practice. I've worked in nonprofit and public-facing communication, especially educational campaigns, and as well as with individual brands in the health, wellness, and medical space, and pretty involved in my earlier years in things related to policy as well. And so really the way I like to kind of look at it is this intersection between science, communication, and culture. Like what does that actually look like? And from there, that's kind of like my playpen, if you will. And so maybe just about 2 years ago, I got an email or a LinkedIn message, I think, from Trevor, kind of talking about what he'd like to do for next steps of the Paleo Diet, as he had taken over the company from Dr. Cordain a few years prior, and thought that maybe I'd be a good fit for what was needed. And so I stepped in and really saw that as an opportunity. I think similarly to Trevor's experience of skepticism and maybe even some distrust initially was, admittedly, and Trevor's heard this before, so I can say this, like my experience as well. So the first time we sat down at a coffee shop, oh boy, did I have a lot of questions for Trevor. And I really,
she did.
and I did, I had seen the name of this diet, which, I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. So you want to say the D word to me, immediately I'm going to come up in arms. But I saw be this dietary principle and uh, lifestyle diet emerge and be almost like weaponized by certain communities. And I didn't like the impact that that had. So I kind of came at Trevor not only from let's review some of the things. I have some questions about the actual science and the dietary guidelines, but I want to talk to you about what you're aiming to do here. Because if I'm joining this company and I'm gonna help really, especially after this rebrand, I want to do it responsibly. I've been in the position of a doctor with a patient in front of me who's looked at information online and the ramifications that you have to unwind sometimes. So I asked him a lot of questions that I think might have challenged his integrity, or like seemed like I was challenging his integrity. And I really liked the way that he answered some of the questions. I really liked the way that he was aware of some of the problems that he had on his plate that weren't necessarily his ownership, but now, or his doing, but now his responsibility as CEO to deal with. And so it's been a really awesome vehicle, if anything, to help clarify, like you said earlier, to demystify some things and then to make something that, yes, this is deemed as like an optimal way for health. That doesn't necessarily mean it's always immediately understandable or accessible. So again, that's kind of where I see my role, and I happily said yes at that point. And it's been a fun and wild ride. So I'm grateful, Trevor.
Something that I love to tell people, because Griffin brought up the issue with the name of the diet, the Paleo Diet. When Dr. Cordain wrote the first book, his title for it, I think I've got this right, it might be slightly off, but was A More Natural Human Diet Based on Paleolithic Ethnographic Data.
That's catchy.
Which the publishers just looked at and said, no, we're not going with that. And it became the Paleo Diet. And it's kind of a mixed blessing, because Paleo Diet is a really catchy name, but it does get away from the origins of the diet, which was completely based on science. When he wrote that first book, it was basically just a giant science review. And certainly the publishers simplified it, made it much easier for people to digest. But from its start, this was all based on just scientific research.
So let's launch that conversation.
Well,
What is the definition of the paleo diet, and what is its clinical application?
yeah. So the fundamental idea behind the paleo diet is we evolved over a very long period of time, hundreds of thousands to millions of years, eating particular foods. And in a very short period of time, from an evolutionary standpoint, basically a blink of an eye, we have fundamentally changed our diet. And the idea is our bodies haven't caught up. So we are eating a whole lot of foods that our body really doesn't know how to process, and it isn't giving our body what we optimally need. So the paleo diet is about getting back to the sort of foods that we should be eating. And there's challenges with this. Those foods that existed 20,000 years ago don't exist now. So we're approximating. We can't eat the exact same diet. But it's still trying to figure out, how do we approximate that? And the simplest answer to this, so the definition that I give most people, is it's just eating more natural, less processed food. So it's fruits, vegetables, meats, fish, and then nuts and seeds sparingly.
Yeah.
It's actually really pretty simple.
What I find is a lot of people don't think that simple works.
Right.
But also another challenge people have is the perceived cost of eating that way, but also the convenience of eating that way. And then they really do. Is it really that simple?
Ooh, this is where I like to come in
Griffin
too.
loves this one.
Partially because, I always, whenever Trevor talks about like, oh, the foods that aren't necessarily around anymore, and I think, yeah, because if they had funfetti cake back then, I mean, ooh, that could have been fun. But no, and I also like to joke because Trevor eats not like the same thing every day, but he has a routine. He's a disciplined athlete. He's clocked in, and a lot of us don't function like Trevor do. And I think it's phenomenal. The man is organized and executes on this healthy diet all the time. But there are people out there who are moms and busy and juggling dietary restrictions of multiple children or their own performance needs for career. So I think the first thing that people should do is acknowledge that your phrase was perceived cost and convenience concern. First off, it's real. And there's a reason why that exists, because that isn't a normalized pathway in life right now. What's been normalized is convenience to a certain extent. And we have to start by asking which things are supposed to be really convenient and how can we improve the things that do need to be. So do we have this idea that dinner should be something that's ready in 5 minutes and just something that can be microwaved? Or can we change that relationship? And I'm not suggesting that we need to sit here and all suddenly normalize the 8-hour meal prep Sunday that YouTubers get famous off of. I mean, gorgeous video to drool over, but no one has time for that. So first acknowledge, yes, cost and convenience can be a concern, but that's why this isn't a magic bullet solution. That's why this isn't something you can put in a pill and just say, go do it. No, it's something that requires a multi-sector collaboration, like what you're starting to see now when people talk about food additives or talk about this and that. Like it has to come from multiple angles. There are ways to simplify both costs or convenience and to reduce cost. Our website is a great source for that, where we try to make it really, really easy. There are tips and tricks that I can always give, but I think to answer your question, yes, cost and convenience can be a concern. It can be a concern based on where you live or the different things that you have to juggle. But I truly do believe there is always a way and a step to make to improve the cost or to make something more convenient.
Yeah, the health coach in me, I specialize in making meal plans. And what I like to do, what most people don't know is they don't even know what it looks like. They didn't grow up eating real food. The vegetables were frozen and cooked to mush and don't taste good. But they also just don't have an idea of what eating real food looks like. And I think that is where the biggest struggle is. And the whole meal prep thing, I'm a mom of four. I have a teenager to a 1-year-old, and the teenager and the 1-year-old need me the most, right? I almost think my teenager needs me more than the 1-year-old. And I am all over the place. I am chauffeur, and I am, when everybody's sick, I'm the one that stays home. And so, I get derailed all the time, right? But the foundation is I know what a real food diet looks like. And I also know all of the shortcuts, right? So, I think that that's one of the things that we come up with when it comes to a real food way of eating. I want to go back to the paleo diet because, and its relationship with autoimmune disease, because when you add life and career, and then you add an autoimmune disease or a chronic illness on top of that, which it can consume your whole life. Like you just want to function, you just want to feel better. Again, the paleo diet was revolutionary for my health. And it's revolutionary for my clients' health. They don't even know I'm putting them on it. I'm just like, we're just going to eat real food. And this is what it looks like. And then I get them a launch point. But the secret is out. I put everybody on a paleo diet as the foundation. Like this is like the baseline for health. And this is the foundation. People need to know why. And so I'm really excited to have you on here, Trevor, to dive into why this is the baseline for a healthy life.
Yeah. So my first question to you is how deep do you want me to go into the science? Because I will tell. So my thesis work with Dr. Cordain was on the impact of diet on autoimmune disease. And when you're talking immunology, it is complex. I actually had to do an extra year of school just to study the immunology so I could do my thesis.
Yeah. So, in autoimmune disease, people have studied for years. They've been told they're crazy. They've gone to 5 to 7 doctors. It's taken 3 to 5 years, sometimes longer. So, what I found in the chronic illness world is a lot of them have read a lot and they don't know fact from fiction or where, I know there's obviously a lot of gray, but it's really hard to know who's right and who's wrong. Right. And so I think hearing from the person who's learned from Dr. Cordain is the place to learn. So they're not practitioners, so they're not going to understand like the super complexity of it, but they're versed enough that I think you can dive in.
So let me give you the most important thing that I felt I learned from, and I think my thesis ended up taking 2.5 years. So let me tell you the most important thing I learned out of those 2.5 years, and I promise I'll keep the terms a little limited, but I have to use a couple. And then please let's dive into anything you'd like to dive into.
Yeah.
But certainly when I was doing my thesis, the most popular theory about autoimmune disease at the time was the molecular mimicry theory,
Mm-hmm.
which was the idea that you would contract a virus. That virus would have something in it that looked like your own body that your immune system would respond to. So when you get a virus, your immune system activates, and basically the cells go and try to figure out what is this virus? How do I identify it? How do I separate it from self? And it basically fails. It
Mm-hmm.
identifies the virus and goes, oh, here's part of the virus called an epitope that we can identify it with. But then that looks like your own body. So after you've dealt with the virus, your immune system starts attacking your own body
Mm-hmm.
because it now thinks it's that virus. I admit from all the research I did, I've never been a huge fan of that theory. There's just too many issues with it. So here's where I need to use a couple terms for you, and I hope I don't go too deep. There's two really important cells in our immune system, two types of T cells. There's what's called a Th17 cell and a T regulatory cell. T regulatory cells tell your body to not activate the immune system. They're the kind of dampen it down. When the immune system starts looking at something, going, "Oh, is there an issue here?" It's the Tregs that come in and say, "No, no, 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 don't respond to this." So T regulatory cells can actually identify self. So when your body starts going, "Ooh, should we respond to this?" T-reg cells go, "No, that's us. Don't respond to that." So they are supposed to basically prevent that autoimmune attack. This other type of cell that I was telling you about, the Th17 cell, is a highly inflammatory cell that they believe is designed to deal with bacterial infection. So you always have a lot of bacteria in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
It's great in your gut, but if it gets past and gets into your system, it's really bad. So these Th17 cells are designed to go and attack that bacteria and kill it. And they do a lot of damage to your body when they deal with the bacterial infection. But your body's belief is it's better to get rid of the bacteria, deal with some damage, but then get us back to a healthy state.
Mm-hmm.
Th17 cells, chronically inappropriately elevated Th17 cells precede every single autoimmune disease. I found a study on basically every single one saying, yep, we saw elevated Th17 beforehand. And what's really interesting is what they've discovered in humans is that T regulatory cells can convert to Th17.
Oh.
And
Wow.
so they're supposed to do that, convert to Th17, deal with the bacterial infection, and then they convert back to T regulatory cells.
Mm-hmm.
But if that doesn't happen, if you have that conversion to Th17, you now have a cell that was designed to identify self that has converted to a Th17 cell and is supposed to attack and has the ability to identify self.
Mm-hmm.
So you see where I'm going? That
Yep.
seems to set us up for a potential autoimmune disease. What kills me is Dr. Cordain and I actually said, we should write a paper on this at the time. And we had an immunologist on my committee who said, nope, I'm not going to write the paper. And then a couple years later, somebody else wrote that paper.
Oh.
We were really upset. But that's been our belief, is that it's not molecular mimicry. It's you have these elevated Th17 cells that can actually identify self proteins
Mm-hmm.
that remain chronically elevated, that over time that can ultimately lead to an autoimmune disease. And so how does diet play into that?
Yep. That was going to
My
be my
whole
question.
thesis was looking at the impact of grains,
Mm-hmm.
particularly wheat. And you see a whole lot of mechanisms in grains, anti-nutrients in grains, so what's called lectins,
Mm-hmm.
that can cause an elevation of Th17.
So how does it do that? Because right now the debate is it the glyphosate or is it the wheat? Right? Like that's a big debate right now. I think that we need to dive into what is in the wheat and the grains that and what that does to the body, because I think that's where a lot of confusion is coming in,
Yeah.
especially on the short-term info of like reels and all of that.
So there's multiple mechanisms. Let's just talk about wheat. There's several things within the gluten protein. One is gliadin.
Hmm.
So gliadin can bind to the digestive lining and basically open up the tight junctions in our gut, which you don't want to have happen. When that happens, that allows the bacteria in your gut to get into circulation.
Hmm.
So one mechanism is just simply Th17 are designed to deal with bacteria. If you are constantly having a leaky gut syndrome, bacteria is constantly getting in, so you're just going to have Th17 elevated all the time, trying to deal with this low-level bacterial invasion. So that's one potential theory. There's another protein called WGA, wheat germ agglutinin, that can actually bind to the cells, go through the cells, and then activate the immune system on the other side. And they're very effective at elevating Th17. Another one that's really interesting, this is, you hear people talk about all the time about why is American wheat so different from European wheat? Why can I eat European wheat and be fine but not be okay in America? A lot of different theories. I'll give you mine. There's something in wheat called amylase trypsin inhibitors, ATIs.
Hmm.
It was discovered a while back that ATIs are a really good natural pesticide. So they started breeding wheat to have a much, in just in North America, to have a much higher ATI content, so they didn't have to spray as many pesticides. Problem is, when you consume those ATIs, there's another immune cell called dendritic cells that just live right along the digestive lining. And they basically have these long arms that poke between the cells of your gut lining, go into the gut and kind of sample what's in there. And when they detect the ATIs, it sets them off. It sets the alarm bells off. And they're meant to be kind of an early warning sign to say, hey, we have bad bacteria in here. We got something bad in your gut. We need to respond. And ATIs will then go and basically tell the body, elevate the Th17.
So it's just the perfect storm,
Yep.
really.
And there's actually a couple more mechanisms that get a lot more complicated, but there are multiple mechanisms. As you said, it's a perfect storm, particularly when you're talking about wheat, that just activates the immune system and elevates these Th17s and keeps them elevated.
I think what he just said there, I think is so important, especially for your audience to understand. It kind of goes back to how there's not this one magic bullet, and we all are looking for, especially in short form video content, right? Whether it's YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram Reels, we're looking for some scientist to come out and say, it's this, so that we all have this sense of ease and we have a sense of certainty that if we just deal with this, our life will be better. And that's not how science works. There's other conversations right now happening in the science where it's like, we will figure this out and da da da. Like, that's
Hmm.
not how science works. Science
Hmm.
tends to be multifactorial. So some of the things that you asked within the question, like, is it this and is it that? I think we have to hold space as a collective that yes, each of these things are going to contribute a part to this perfect storm. We also have to be able to not only appreciate them in isolation, but appreciate how they influence one another, like Trevor had
Hmm.
just said. And that can feel a lot less satisfying when there's a YouTuber out there who says none of those things are real. It's just this one thing.
Yeah.
That's rarely ever the case in science.
Yeah. And here's one other important thing to add to that, to what Griffin is just saying, is in some ways, we've kind of figured out how to create that unfortunate perfect storm for ourselves, meaning all life likes to protect itself. Animals can run away or fight. Plants can't really do that. So one of the ways plants protect themselves is with anti-nutrients.
Hmm.
So if you went into the field and tried to eat some wheat or a lot of these grains raw, you'd get very sick because the anti-nutrient content's really high. And the idea is you'll eat one plant, but you'll never eat that plant again because you knew the
Yeah.
reaction your body had to it. And so people talk about all the time, yes, wheat has these anti-nutrients in it, but we cook them out. And so we looked at the research on that, and what you see in the most current research is you cook most of it out, but a little bit remains, and it's actually still can have these effects. So unfortunately, we've cooked enough out that you don't get violently sick right away and go, okay, I'm never going to eat that again because I ate that and it felt awful.
Right.
But you get enough of these anti-nutrients that you don't feel an acute effect. But over time, this little effect that just keeps the immune system elevated, that just causes a little bit of leaky gut, over years to decades, that ultimately leads to diseases, and you don't make the association. You don't say, oh, I've been
Right.
eating wheat for 20 years and I was fine. Now I'm not fine.
Yeah.
I actually hear that a lot.
Yes.
Like I've been eating wheat all this time and now my stomach hurts when I eat it. I think one of the things is we can kind of touch on ultra processed foods. There's wheat in everything. My daughter was
Hmm.
diagnosed with celiac disease. I kind of figured it out when she was like 6 weeks old, but she was clinically diagnosed when she was 2. In that time, it's in salad dressings, it's in, soy sauce, it's in things that you would never think that wheat is in. It's in lots of candy, and not that my kids eat a lot of candy, but it's in everything, right? It's in soups, it's in broths, it's in turkeys that you get on Thanksgiving. It's in
Mhm.
everything. So I I think there's a lot of overconsumption that happens even with it being, cooked out. We also in America don't let wheat ripen on the stalk either to like get rid
Hmm.
of those anti-nutrients. So it's a I think a lot of it's, again, it's that perfect storm. We don't naturally let it degerminate on the stalk. We don't let it ferment. We don't harvest it in a classical way anymore. We do pour glyphosate on it. We have bred it to have these toxins, and then we overconsume it to begin with. So there's a lot there. As people start trying to like last night, my one of my best friends is getting corn out of her diet. She's like allergic to it. And so she got big corn out. Now she's getting little corn out. And she's like, it's in everything. And I'm like,
Oh, it
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
It is hard not to eat it.
Mhm.
yeah.
That's such a perfect segue to the UPF conversation, right?
Yeah.
And going to Taco Bell and getting a number, whatever, and ordering that acutely might just cause you gas or something that you might just kind of like look over. But an acute, and no disrespect to Taco Bell, they were with me throughout college. But this chronic consumption, this chronic like low grade consumption of these anti-nutrients, like Trevor said, that it contribute to pathways that, potentially lead to disease. Or to your point much earlier that I'd taken note on about your daughter and looking at all these gluten-free foods that were just deprived of actual nutrients. You're like, what actually is in this? And in the world's attempt to mass produce or to meet need of hunger, we add all this stuff in there that's cheap. We're like, well, the way to do this is just quantity rather than quality. And I think what we're facing now is a global reckoning of, okay, maybe there's a time and a place for accessibility to figure out how to make things in mass and da 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 da. But is that always the way? And can we stop, pause, and go, we've gone a little too far. We need to like reel in some things here. And it's not always well, if you can't pronounce it, it must be bad for you. That's just not the logic train
Right.
we don't want to toot down, but I do think we are facing a reckoning, and there's this opportunity to just take a step back and say, if this is the lifestyle I have, right? Like what you talked about, like if this is what's normal and this is what our culture kind of accepts, can I step back and just pick a few areas here and there where I can simplify it, where I don't have to have these always in my life? Do I need a venti something with 8 pumps and a Diet Coke at lunch and a thing at every meal?
Yeah. So I want to address an elephant in the room when it comes to the
Hmm.
paleo diet and the need for perfection.
Mm,
So, there's this thing where, especially people in the chronic illness world, they just want to feel better. So they tend to feel like it's all or nothing. If they can't do all of it, they're never going to get better. And it's something that I try to tackle regularly and consistently. So I'd love to hear you guys, as the paleo diet leaders, your perspective on that.
Look, I'll give you an example from personal experience, and this is where I have to be a little bit humble because I do eat paleo, and I would love to tell everybody, I'm pretty invincible now and all that sort of stuff, but not true at all. Paleo changed my life. So, I mean, I told you about my cycling experience, and I'm 50, about to turn 54. I still did a pro race last fall.
Awesome.
So it's done great things for me. But, we all age, things happen. So in the last couple of years, I've actually developed atrial fibrillation, which is very common in endurance athletes. And I admit I've been reading all the science to try to figure out what's going on. One of the things that I discovered was how much just simple sugar consumption can contribute to AFib.
Mhm.
And so you see in endurance athletes, it's an epidemic right now. I know a doctor, so the doctor actually I see works with a world tour team. So there's teams that race the Tour de France.
Mhm.
And she told me, I can't give you the name of the team, but I've given over half of the riders on that team ablations, which is what you give for atrial fibrillation. They're all in their 20s and 30s.
That's crazy.
And what you've seen in the endurance world is just this push towards simple sugars, simple sugars, simple sugars.
Yeah.
So I finally just went, I spent a year, I took the simple sugars out of my diet and became pretty much asymptomatic. I just didn't see it anymore.
Mhm.
Um, for a variety of reasons, I kind of fell off the bandwagon. And sure enough, the AFib started getting bad again. And what I have seen is, yeah, I can do some simple sugars, but if I go too far, it comes back. I kind of had to be perfect to get myself out of, to get myself to where
Mhm.
I'm asymptomatic. But once I'm asymptomatic, a little bit here and there I'm fine with. And that really kind of fits with our philosophy. We have what we call an 85-15 rule. Eat paleo 85% of the time, have fun 15% of the time. And I think you're okay. Your body can handle a certain amount of what you shouldn't be eating and be okay.
I love that you talk about that. I did know about the heart problems in endurance
Yeah.
athletes, and I've worked with several marathon runners. Like they do like 50-mile marathons and things like
Yep.
that. And they're always like, it's like 70% carbs of their diet. That's the runner's
Mm-hmm.
diet that they're doing, and they end up gaining weight. They end up while running, 25, 30 miles a week. They're diabetic. And so then I transition them to a paleo diet. Their times improve, they lose the weight, and they reverse their type 2 diabetes. But these people they're athletes and they're having major health problems. Like type 2 diabetes is no joke. Like everybody has it. So everybody's just kind of like, it's a thing. But it's a really big deal, especially if you're an endurance athlete. Or I've
Yep.
also worked with like boxers and MMA fighters and things like that who have the exact same problem. Like they're training at a very high amount, but they're also eating sugar basically at a very high amount, and they're becoming diseased from
Yeah.
Yeah.
following that.
I think, going back, all or nothing thinking is rarely the answer.
Mhm.
Is what I would say clinically for nearly anything. Talk to a therapist, talk to a physician. There's there's distinct times where all or nothing thinking should be tapped into, and it should be intentionally tapped into. Everything else we have to like put in a perspective of what we're talking about. When it comes to food, especially therapeutic food or therapeutic dietary lifestyles, those are laid out to empower, not to induce fear or to
Mhm.
overwhelm. So for adoption, Trevor talked about for himself, he's a very regimented athlete and professional. He's the CEO of a company. That man lives a regimented lifestyle. So for him, which is it's a compliment. For him, adopting that perfection first and then like wean later to see where I can play, that works for him. That doesn't work for every single person. You might have to take baby steps. But there's also this it's about not just avoidance, it's about what you're putting into your food. So kind of commenting on when your daughter was diagnosed and looking at gluten-free food, right? It's about choosing what you want to fill into your life, not just what you want to take out or what you have to avoid. So if you're going about it from this fear-based way, then you start to see, I can't remember how many years ago, but orthorexia started on the rise, right? And people who were just like, I can't eat this. And we started to ask, is the stress surrounding this perfection actually worse on the body and the mind than if they had just consumed the food in the first place? And there is, I'm not going to go down that train, but I will say there is something to that for a future discussion. So when it comes to figuring out how to implement paleo, or if you're one of these people where you're like, okay, I know this therapeutic diet or this dietary lifestyle would do me good or my family members good, you have to think about how to do this in the long term, which might mean that this is a transition that unfolds over a couple of years. If you try to roll this out at Thanksgiving and you're going to get a lot of groaning and a lot of people ticked off that there's not a huge plate of white mashed potatoes with a ton of butter and salt. You've got to figure out how to stepwise this in your own situation. But like I said, all or nothing thinking rarely leads to something that's sustainable. It might lead to something that has acute success, like 75 hard or something like that, that will have a short-term reset. We are something that wants to promote a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that there's help within rules, but then there's also like the wiggle room, right? And people really like rules. So, that 85-15 I think is really good. What I find is people overestimate the 15.
They're wiggling a little too hard.
Yeah, I find it's typically people do 50-50, where I do think that a little bit of like going 30 days of just like really staying within the framework is really helpful, and then finding where that wiggle room is. Like you had to go very regimented to revert to get asymptomatic with the AFib, and then you could find where the wiggle room is. And when people have chronic illness and they're in the throes, like they're really uncomfortable, I think the framework is so essential because it gives them a sense of control and a sense of, okay, I'm nourishing my body within this bubble, right? And then once I start feeling better, we all do this, we start going, okay, I can have these potato chips, okay, I've been really missing this, and that you kind of find your tolerance in there. So I don't also find that people who have been sick for a really long time, and they tend to try every single diet out there, so but they kind of almost find the most regimented version, like the one that restricts the most, and all of that. Carnivore is like that big one right now. Where I think every therapeutic diet has its place, but I still want to emphasize, I do believe the paleo diet's that foundation. And so, I kind of would like to maybe clarify again, like we talked about, like if we put it in a food pyramid, what are the people really like rules? So I want to kind of catch into that. What does the paleo pyramid really look like?
Yeah, this is really interesting. We have a journal club that we have in staff that we implemented in the past year. And part of that is because not everyone on our team has the expertise that myself, Trevor, and our chief science officer, Dr. Mark Smith, have. And so we wanted to make sure that we were living the principles of education. So we implemented this journal club. At one of the journal clubs in the fall, I talked about the history of the food pyramid. And I talked about what the intentions were behind it, how Harvard had some great pushback over the years, every single time a new model is released, and how eventually they moved from this concept of a hierarchical, I can never say that word, there's too many CH things happening, to more of an idea of a plate, so the my plate. And then we had this conversation about an article idea called My Paleo Plate. Like, what would it look like to have a My Paleo Plate? And did we have a few conversations about it, because it's kind of like what you talked about. It's the paleo diet is this foundation, much like our logo and what you might see on True Paleo or Paleo Flex certifications is what we call tree of life. So what I like to think about is the paleo diet principles are those roots of the tree. And then what your needs are, or for people with certain beliefs, it kind of branches out. So you come back to this. And so a full healthy tree has many different branches, many different leaves going on. It's not just this like one or two piece, Joshua tree type of thing. It's about diversity. So I think you look at this, and we don't necessarily dive into it should be X percentage of this macro and X percentage of this. We recognize that that is a lot of how the modern conversation is framed, is via macros. We think a lot gets lost when you start prioritizing quantity over quality. So whereas a lot of other dietary lifestyles, or like you said, dietary rules, will focus on hitting numbers, we prefer to say, look at the things that you should be eating and diversify. And then that's where the benefit of working with an individual practitioner, right, helps you understand, okay, I really learned how to diversify. I really learned to normalize all of these healthy foods. And I'm going to work to individualize maybe certain quantities now that I have quality under. And, some people are going to do better being vegetarian. Some people are not. And that's something that needs to be really figured out at an individual level. But from like a national scale, what would that paleo plate look like? We're not going to put a plate in front of you. We're going to put a tree in front of you, and we're going to say, like, as many leaves are there here. That's how you should be diversifying your diet and really focusing on the quality. And that's where we'd start. Trevor, would you edit what I said? I know I touched
No, that was
subject of macros.
that was great. Could I actually go back to your question about making it manageable?
Yeah.
Because there was something I wanted to bring up, because I actually come at it from a slightly different perspective. So I've been a cycling coach for over 20 years. And I have worked with, from athletes who have been top 10 in the Tour de France to athletes who bought their first bike a month ago. I have seen the whole gamut, and I'll get to why this is relevant to diet in a second. But do you want to know what's the biggest difference between amateur cyclists and top pros?
Yeah. What is it?
Amateurs follow a plan to a T no matter what and feel they have to go hard all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually the pros who are the ones that are much more willing to go out and say, I had intervals scheduled today. I don't feel them. I'm not going to do them. Pros are the ones who look at it and go, I have to do a lot of hard work and I'm in this for the long run. I'm doing this the next 10 or whatever years. I need to make this manageable. I need to be flexible. I need to be adaptable. And you can see them really adjust. And I will tell you, when I was racing professionally myself, it was hard. I was fatigued a lot, but I was taught how to make it manageable. And even though it was hard, it was a lot of fun. Where you see amateurs kind of kill themselves, and for 2 months they do amazing training, but they fatigue themselves. It becomes unmanageable. It becomes too much. And eventually they just go, I can't handle this. I don't know how the pros handle it. And it's because they're actually trying to be too strict. And I think that's really important to bring into the diet world as well. If you go into it, any diet, don't care if it's paleo or any other, and go, I have to do this every day. I have to be strict and be that regimented. You're not going to last.
Yeah.
I always tell people, be the pro dieter, which is be flexible. Look at it and go, I want to do this next 10, 20 years. So am I going to get on myself when I have that periodic slice of pizza, or am I going to look at it with much longer term vision? And I think that's
I
really important.
I do too. Because it's not a sprint, especially, and I think again in the chronic illness world and autoimmune disease, when they're in a flare and they feel awful, they just want to feel better. And so they want to be as perfect as possible. And really it's about nourishment and
Hmm.
giving the body what it needs. So you take the stuff out of the way that's hindering healing and you give the body what it needs to be fueled optimally. And people really prefer a magic bullet. I
Yeah,
think
they
they feel
do.
like they have something they
Yep.
can believe and they can grasp onto.
Yeah.
And and so I always try to say it's really about giving your body, your cells, what they need to function. And at the end of the day, that's good food, but also you need soul food, which is at 15%, right?
Yeah.
So, I have a client who's in the thick of mold illness, living in a mold thick home without any support. And she had family in town and she's like, I gave in and had ice cream with them because we were celebrating a graduation. I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
Like the emotional experience of having your family there and having their support and and being able to join in. I'm like, that's way more beneficial than if you had skipped it and
Yeah.
felt, or feeling guilty afterwards. And it really is the long haul. And you have to, you want to be healthy for the rest of your life. And so part of that is your body can handle pizza and ice cream. I mean, for me, I couldn't have regular pizza. I could have gluten-free, dairy-free
Yeah.
pizza because I
Hmm.
can't have gluten or dairy. It makes me violently ill, but it's like that junk food or the gluten-free junk food or whatever, like you can handle it sometimes. It's okay. But people really just want to feel better really fast. And I think that's where it gets really hard, and where people come in with really strict rules. People really like that because, like, oh, if I follow the rules, I'm going to feel better.
And that gets exactly to what Griffin was saying and talking about. It is about nourishment. I'd be hesitant with any diet that says, here's exactly what you have to eat every day. Here's what you have to have for breakfast. Here's what you have to have for lunch. Here's what you have to have for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be flexible. As you said, it's about nourishing the body and getting that diversity. There is no one perfect formula.
Yeah, I think the programs that do have that, where it's so regimented, I've witnessed some individuals go on programs like that, where it's like super regimented for 3 months. And I mean, everything is you're locked in. It's like even sent to your door. Here's what to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And then they attempt to do this. Okay, now you can start to rework in normal foods or like your autonomy and your
Yeah.
agency. And I just don't see that be successful very
Mm-hmm.
often. And I have a lot of family members who have tried all the diets. I mean, I grew up where the bathroom books were Weight Watchers, Atkins, all that. Those were the books that were in our bathroom, because in Midwest, everyone has a bookshelf in the bathroom, right? But the GLP-1s now that they've tried, I've watched a couple of family members, I mean, experience drastic weight loss and so many different changes in their life. And then when they had been weaned or tapered, um, hearing the self disappointment and the self critique
Mm-hmm.
in the narrative that they hold if they go and they have a brownie or something.
Yeah.
And partially
Yeah.
because some of the changes weren't sustainable because they were on that type of food delivery program. So they did start to gain weight, and then it became really coupled. So I think one of the things that I like, there's three things I kind of like to say when we're approaching this from a lifestyle aspect, and kind of tying in the paleo plate way, right? One, you should romanticize your life when it comes to diet as much as possible and play with your food. The more that you can go in and play with your food, your plate is probably going to be healthier. So
Mm-hmm.
adopt that childlike sense of curiosity when you're in the grocery store, especially the perimeter of the grocery store. And if you've never tried a beet before, and you're looking at this thing and it's crazy and it's huge and it takes up a thing, have a riot of a time and try it. If you're playing with your food, you're not only happier because of the way that you perceive your food is the first step of digestion and what it releases in your body. So play with your food, romanticize your life, take the pressure off of yourself, because that's not going to do a really good thing. And then the last thing I typically like to say when it comes to satisfying those cravings or those types of cultural events, we have these little rituals with ourselves that we are either conscious of or not so conscious of. For women, an example of that is every time it's the week before my period, I suddenly crave a bunch of fortified cereals and certain things, because what my body's actually asking for are certain nutrients that I'm needing. What my brain is telling me is that this makes me feel good because I've set up a reward system that when I'm feeling sad, the answer is this. Now, sometimes they're like, to your point, you're going to want to continue to celebrate a certain way. Like, okay, we don't need to change every culture within the family. Ice cream to celebrate is okay once in a while. But
Mm-hmm.
other things you have to stop and ask every time I feel sad or I get not reprimanded at work, but like questioned on my performance, I feel a sense of lowered self-worth. And the thing that makes me feel more in control is something related to diet. So this third thing is to just develop a radical sense of curiosity and non-judgment about our relationship with food. And that doesn't mean that it's going to change your decision when you're standing at the gas station, staring down at the Snickers bar in that moment. But if you start to ask yourself questions, you can never unknow the answer. So it can start off this like beautiful cascade of curiosity, and you might start to notice yourself making different decisions.
I love that, and I apply that in my practice as well. I cravings are one of those things that it's like, well, what were you actually craving?
Mm-hmm.
Let's dive into that. But also, I think when it comes to playing with food, there is a lot of fear around food, and like people who've really never eaten vegetables before or anything like that. Don't they like? I remember when I first started really cooking, I didn't exactly know what I was doing, and I was throwing away a lot of stuff that I'd buy, and then I'd get intimidated and I would just stare at it at the fridge and then go to something else. And now I've written a cookbook and I have over like 250 recipes in my arsenal and like all of this stuff. But it's like, what I tell people is, I'm like, if you're really scared, let's go. There's like, I live in Phoenix, so we have a lot of resources at our disposal. We have a lot of healthy restaurants that use a lot of colorful ingredients and they taste really good. So I tell people, like, here's some restaurants that I recommend you go try. And so if you want to try a beet, this is a really great beet salad to try, you know?
Hmm.
And so it's a very low risk because if they don't like it, they lose a little bit of money. They can probably get it swapped out for something else, but they get an opportunity to see what it can look like when it's pretty and to taste it at a, you know, they're not buying it and throwing money away there. And it's this whole experience where this nice restaurant, the ambience is really good. And so I kind of almost take it even back further. I'm like, you have permission to eat out and to try it. Like, yes, they might, you know, the new thing right now is seed oils. And I'm like, yeah, there might be seed oils and all that, but it's more important that you eat the vegetable, that you try it and see if you even like it, you know, and then you can recreate it at home and, you know, worry about all of those things. But when you eat out, don't worry about it, right? And so it's like, let's just do that in a very low risk way. And I find that to be very successful because they don't have to stare at this thing that's covered in a little bit of dirt and a weird skin that they don't really know what to do with. Type of thing. And same with like some people, like I actually have a client that I'm going to be bringing raw veggies and cooked veggies with salt on them because he doesn't salt his food. I'm going to be like, here, why don't you try some vegetables? like,
Hmm.
like literally, like that's what I'm going to be doing is like, you've never even had broccoli. Like, you don't even know if you like it or not. And he's like, I'm really picky. I'm like, are you picky or do you not know how to cook it so that it tastes good?
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
I think that that's a huge barrier too when it comes to eating real food. People don't have any experience with what it looks like, how to cook it, how to prepare it. If you just try to eat a beet like an apple, it tastes like dirt.
Yeah, it does.
Especially if you've never had anything earthy before, if you've had only ultra processed food, you don't even know. Like, to me, you know, red beets taste good now, but you know, in my 20s, I was like, it kind of tastes like dirt.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, you think about the things that got people to eat vegetables in the 90s was cheddar cheese and ketchup, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or to eat their eggs. And then in the
Yep.
2010s, the way people got to eat Brussels sprouts is just cover it in bacon, right?
Yeah.
So there's like always this, I don't want to call it like a gateway drug to veggies, but there's this thing. And I love how you are encouraging people, hey, continue your social life, go out to these restaurants, and not only
Mhm.
that, I can give you these recommendations. There's this doctor who is in my profession who does this thing where he treats produce kind of like my wish list of restaurants that I want to try out this year. But he kind of categorizes it for like what's in season. And then it's this, again, sense of play and it's this sense of exploration. And if you have a partner or a family, it can be this thing you team up on. And then every week at the beginning of the week, he shares like, this is the list that I'm out for this week. And it's like a scavenger list of all of these fruits and veggies that he wants to incorporate into his life. And so then as the week goes by, he's like, yep, I knocked out these today. Like I had a beet. And then it's this thing where not only is he exposing everyone to a different type of relation to have with food, where it's like kids love a scavenger hunt, right? Kids
Yeah.
love to be able to finish off the list or to do this. But then it's like I'm packing it in, and it's not a list of all the stuff to avoid. It's all this list of stuff you can fill your life with. And it's exactly like what people do when they save lists on Yelp or Google Maps. Like, I want to check out, have you checked out this new restaurant? No, I haven't checked. Have you checked out this beat yet? Like, I wish we could
Mhm.
make that a normal, just like really fun conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. You also you touched on something that is so unbelievably important to me, where you said, when you're hungry, ask yourself what you're hungry for.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Something I am a very big believer in is we think that hunger is an on-off signal. You're
Mhm.
hungry, eat something, you won't be hungry anymore. Your body is usually hungry for something. And I think we've lost a bit of our ability to hear what our body is saying it needs. So hunger signals get turned on. We go, okay, go to McDonald's, buy a Big Mac. And your body goes, well, thanks for that. You gave me all these calories, so I'll pack those away. But what I needed was thiamine or riboflavin or something else.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't give me that. So I'm not going to turn off the hunger signals. And I
Yeah.
believe this is why you have so many people saying, I ate thousands of calories and I'm still always hungry.
Mm-hmm.
It's because the body didn't get what it needed. So, forget the paleo diet, forget all these different diets. I think if there's one really key lesson for everybody who's trying to improve their overall diet is focus on nutrient density.
Yes.
eat foods that are nutrient dense. And we did this analysis where we ranked the different food groups in terms of their nutrient density. And the top of the list in order was vegetables, seafood, fruit, meats, eggs. You eat more from the top of that list, you're going to be less hungry. Your body's going to get the nutrients it needs. You're going to be in a healthier place.
I think too, because the conversation about hunger, what you said, cravings, especially in the conversation of GLP-1, right? Cravings is a huge conversation, but so is satiety. And not if we were to step back and I would ask any one of us, especially any one of us maybe like 20 years ago, because considering all of our stories that we talked about today, let's go back to like 20 years ago. And if I were to ask you, what does it feel like in your body? First, and what does it feel like in your mind to know that you're full? And that was the language that we tend to use to describe satiety in the English language. It was when I'm full. When we think about full, we tend to think of like bursting, overdone. And so for a lot of us, the concept of having eaten enough or being done with eating wasn't until there was physical discomfort expressed by your body, or there was some type of emotional kind of cup being overfilled. You know what I mean? But the problem with that is that signal or those symptoms that get expressed in the body are typically those types of symptoms that happens when you've gone too far or gone too much, because there needs to be a period of time that your body is able to kind of go check the status and go, oh, okay, we're done. It needs time, but we tend to keep eating before we give that. So I think the other question is, what does satiety feel like in your body? Not what does being full feel like? What does satiety feel like to you? And speaking of beet salads, I experienced this yesterday at dinner. We have a roasted beet and blueberry salad, which has like pistachios and radishes. And our recipe developer, Jess Case, made it. I will send it to you afterwards. And my friend brought something else and we ate it. And I watched as I ate, because it was all paleo, except for some butter and some lobster. But outside of that, I watched how she was eating and I was eating, and the pace at with which we were eating, which one of us kind of went back for something else. And by the end, our lobster portions that she had set out were done. The salad was done, and I kind of just checked in, like, how am I feeling right now? And what I didn't notice was that kind of bursting, bloating, like, yeah, I'm done. Like literally the arm behind the chair kind of cocked back, right? Like, oh, I'm done. That didn't exist. And there was something I think that happens for people that's like, there's a lack of gratification in that if we don't have it. So can you normalize not having that feeling, but know that the experience is complete?
Yeah. Well, satiety, as the name implies, it's eating till you're satisfied.
Yeah, I think what's hard is we're so out of tune. We kind of talked about this in the beginning. We're so out of tune with our bodies that we literally don't know. And I think that that's why like the macros and calories and all the numbers and things are so heavily pushed, because people don't know. Like I have a family member who doesn't know what it feels like to be hungry and doesn't know what it feels like to be full. The only time she knows she's full is when she physically is ill because she can't fit in anymore. But she never feels hungry. She never feels full. And it's and she's like, I don't know how to do this, but she's also has 3 jobs and she's a mom. So she's just running from thing to thing to thing all the time. And there's no chance to really just kind of retrain because she doesn't have the time. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where nutrient density can play a huge role, because it gets to the point where your body, and she's also on a ton of vitamins because she is undernourished. And so it's like her body's just craving nutrients all the time, is what I really believe it is. And that's where I'm a big fan of the nutrient density of food.
Yes.
And when you focus on nutrient density, then you can tell the difference between a craving for something for fun and your body needs something. Like you'll be able to start telling the difference. And it's a really foreign concept for a lot of people. And then you add chronic illness where your body's just all over the place and you're in pain and you're tired and you can't think straight. And so I think that focusing on nourishment and nutrient density really kind of, it gives your body what it needs, but it demystifies it too. And then, the flexibility within that, I think, is so is so huge for people, because when you're tired, the rules get exhausting. And
Yeah.
so having something that gives you permission to kind of just go, okay, as long as I'm getting nourished,
Hmm.
then I can play with that once I'm feeling better.
And are you craving a certain food, or are you craving comfort and nostalgia and a sense of
Hmm.
like something that can't be tapped
And
into?
that's okay.
Exactly.
It's just recognizing, why am I craving this? There was a really stressful time in my life in my 20s when all I wanted was a Starbucks every day. And I was like, why the heck is it Starbucks? But it was all the memories associated with that, all the late nights in the coffee shop with my best friends, studying and then having these deep conversations. And once I realized that that's what it was, I started reaching out to my friends and doing the human connection thing more. And
Yeah.
then my Starbucks addiction diminished to, like, I can make coffee at home. But there was a time when I was so stressed out that I had to, like, my brain was like, you have to do this. And then when I really realized what I was needing, I was able to make an adjustment.
What a beautiful, like food's such a
Yeah.
great mirror back to us. But I do think, you're talking about the numbers, like, well, that's why we have this. I think that if we spent more time, especially like us, we have this conversation as a health advocacy organization, if we put more effort down educating people about body literacy, we wouldn't be so reliant on the validation of someone else's quantifiable metrics. And
Mm-hmm.
now, and then this isn't uh, taking away the importance of, certain numbers that are there that you need, but the government and other organizations have put that out there because they're like, listen, this is just something we can all get behind as a starter. It's a great point, but if we spent more time learning what the body is telling us from an individual level, we wouldn't have to rely on stuff like, oh, well, one alcoholic drink per hour is okay. Really? Because I just looked at that person. That person's body is telling them half a drink in that they've hit their max, right? Or,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like this might be a certain number or quantity, but look at this person is feeling. That's really not the case for them. So body literacy is so great.
Well, it's just this is what why I said I think this is one of the most important lessons because it is so simple. As you said, when you're hungry, instead of immediately going to the bag of chips because you're hungry, reach for something that's nutrient dense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of us can do that most of the time. And every once in a while, yeah, you have the craving for the chips. Go and eat the chips when you're like, this isn't about satisfying hunger. This is, I really want chips right now. As long as
Yeah.
you're not doing that every day. And look, I did a 6 hour bike ride yesterday. I came home absolutely exhausted and went, I did a 6 hour ride. I can reward myself here. And the little energy I had left, I drove over to Safeway and bought a thing of really greasy chicken wings.
Yum.
That's
Sounds good.
what I was craving. It had nothing to do with nutrition or nutrient density. But yeah, it's a really simple thing you can do where when you're hungry, just say, can I satisfy that hunger with something that's more nutrient dense? It's just the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. And I also want to say, when you're eating real nutrient dense food, it's
Hmm.
pretty. It looks
Hmm.
nice on your plate. I think a lot of people, again, it's from a lack of exposure and awareness, but like, I think one of the things that most people are so surprised by, like when they do try the recipes that I suggest and things, is how simple they are and how delicious they are and how pretty they are. Like, vegetables are pretty.
Oh, they are so.
And when you're adding herbs and spices to your protein, to your meats and all of that, like, it's really pretty. It's not white and bland. It's not, you get the beets and the radishes and the pistachios and the berries and the leafy greens, and then the dressing with the herbs. And it smells so good. Like, it's just this whole experience, and it doesn't have to be hard. I love the mission that you're on. I'm so grateful that you guys joined me. And it's just, I feel like I'm on the team shouting it from the rooftops. Like, the paleo diet it truly is this baseline that's really easy to follow. Like I said, it was life-changing for me. It was life-changing for Trevor. Um, and it really is just, I think, demystifying it and making it, having people really hear from you guys and what it is, I think is going to really change things for people. And so I'm really, really excited that you guys came on.
Thank you
Like I
so
said,
much for having us. This was delightful.
Yeah, no, really appreciate you saying this. That was a ton of fun. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivingwhole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivingwhole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.